Good morning. Here is your global news report for March 31, 2026. The global landscape is currently defined by two major geopolitical confrontations: the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict and escalating tensions in the Middle East. These conflicts are significantly impacting global energy markets, forcing nations to adjust fuel taxes and diversify energy procurement due to shifts in Russian energy supply and soaring oil prices. Simultaneously, various countries are reporting on domestic political and social issues, illustrating the complex interplay between international crises and national economies and policies. The US-Israel war against Iran has intensified, with Iran attacking Kuwaiti power plants and Israeli oil refineries, leading to the de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This has caused crude oil prices to surge, compelling nations to adjust fuel taxes and seek alternative procurement. In the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Ukrainian drones have targeted Russian fuel infrastructure, disrupting energy supply chains amidst Western sanctions. These international conflicts are having a multifaceted impact on national economies and societies. The Russia-Ukraine conflict and its geopolitical repercussions continue to unfold. Ukrainian drone attacks on the Russian city of Taganrog have resulted in casualties, and Baltic Sea fuel export infrastructure has also been targeted, affecting domestic fuel production in Russia. The United States has eased its fuel blockade by allowing Russian oil tankers to pass, following Cuba's energy crisis. Meanwhile, a Chinese captain of a Russian tanker seized in French waters has been found guilty, highlighting efforts to evade sanctions. Ukrainian President Zelensky has proposed an Easter ceasefire and a halt to attacks on energy infrastructure. The Middle East situation is increasingly tense, with Iran's role being a primary focus. The US-Israel war against Iran has lasted for a month, during which Iran attacked Kuwaiti power plants and Israeli oil refineries, and the Israeli parliament was also interrupted by missile attacks. While President Trump claims progress in ceasefire negotiations, he views Iran's infrastructure destruction as a threat, to which Iran has retorted that the proposal is unrealistic. The de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz has raised concerns about international food and fertilizer supply chains. In Israel, the reintroduction of the death penalty for Palestinians has been approved, and a UN peacekeeping force member was killed in southern Lebanon. Global energy market fluctuations and supply chain impacts are currently pronounced. Brent crude prices have surged by approximately 60% in a month to over $116 due to the Iran war and the Strait of Hormuz blockade. Governments worldwide are responding with fuel tax adjustments, Australia have theirs, and supply source diversification. Japanese companies are procuring naphtha from outside the Middle East, and JA Zeno predicts fertilizer price hikes. In Russia, fuel production has decreased due to Ukrainian attacks, while South Korea has resumed naphtha imports from Russia, and Georgia is seeking alternative crude oil. In Chile, South America, soaring fuel prices have triggered protests, and trucking diesel prices have also skyrocketed, demonstrating widespread economic impacts. Next, here are the key stories from the US. The Supreme Court has begun oral arguments regarding the constitutionality of birthright citizenship, potentially reviewing a long-standing practice challenged by the Trump administration. In foreign policy and security, U.S. military aircraft have been destroyed in the Middle East, and troop deployments are underway, while domestically, airport disruptions have eased following the payment of back wages to TSA employees. The Supreme Court commenced oral arguments on birthright citizenship, a matter concerning whether all children born in the United States continue to automatically acquire citizenship, potentially reviewing a long-standing constitutional practice that the Trump administration has challenged. An Iranian attack on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia destroyed a U.S. Air Force E-3 Sentry (AWACS) aircraft, dealing a severe blow to U.S. surveillance capabilities. Additionally, thousands of U.S. troops have been deployed to the Middle East amid rising threats of ground attacks by Iran. Long wait times at U.S. airports, which had plagued travelers for over a month, have significantly decreased after Transportation Security Administration (TSA) employees received their first paychecks. This allows many employees to cover overdue rent and living expenses. Next, here are the key stories from Europe. Security and international relations have seen significant developments, including arrests following a bomb attempt in Paris, stalled negotiations between the UK and France over migrant funding in the English Channel, and a warning from an exiled Russian oligarch about potential new attacks by President Putin on UK soil. A bomb attempt occurred in front of the Bank of America headquarters in Paris, France, resulting in the arrest of 3 individuals who had planted a device containing liquid fuel and an ignition source. Negotiations between France and the UK regarding a new 3-year funding package of €700 million are stalled, despite the UK's funding for France's coastal surveillance system ending on March 31, 2026. Exiled Russian billionaire Mikhail Khodorkovsky warned that Russian President Putin might launch another Salisbury-style attack within the UK and potentially mass troops on the borders of NATO member states like Estonia. Next, here are the key stories from the Middle East. Tensions are escalating as Iran executed 2 dissidents, and is also suspected of involvement in a French terror attempt. The Arab League has condemned Iran's attack on Kuwait, and in Israel, a bill for the death penalty for Palestinians is under deliberation, contributing to the region's tense situation. Iran executed 2 members of the banned dissident organization, the People's Mujahideen of Iran, PMI, Akbar Daneshvarkar, 60, and Mohammad Taghavi Sangdehi, 59, at Gezal-Hezer prison. Ahmed Abulghait, Secretary-General of the Arab League, strongly condemned Iran's attack on Kuwaiti power plants and desalination facilities, stating that attacks on civilian infrastructure constitute war crimes under international humanitarian law. An Israeli parliamentary bill is under deliberation that would make the death penalty the default sentence for Palestinian prisoners convicted of murdering Israelis. This bill was proposed by far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. Next, here are the key stories from Russia. Drone attacks by Ukraine have caused damage to port facilities in southern regions, resulting in civilian casualties. Domestically, the economic downturn in the private sector is accelerating. Internationally, France has issued a verdict against a Russian-linked tanker captain, and Russia has expelled a British diplomat, marking significant developments in military, economic, and diplomatic spheres. A Ukrainian drone attack in the southern Russian city of Taganrog resulted in 1 civilian death. The Ust Luga port, a major Baltic export hub, was also attacked, causing a fire and disrupting fuel shipments. Russia's private sector economy accelerated its downturn in early 2026, with industrial production decreasing by 2% during the winter, excluding defense-related sectors. Meanwhile, a French court sentenced a Chinese captain of a Russian-linked tanker, suspected of violating Western sanctions, to 1 year in absentia and a fine of €150,000. Russia expelled a British diplomat on suspicion of economic espionage and handed down a 4-year prison sentence in absentia to exiled information specialist Andrei Soldatov for violating the foreign agent law. Next, here are the key stories from China. The nation has seen diverse developments in its economy, technology, and diplomacy, including the Hong Kong listing of an AI-powered fertility treatment company, a major outage of an AI chatbot, and a visit by a Ministry of National Defense delegation to Europe. Chinese biotechnology firm Diogens, which utilizes AI for rapid chromosome testing in fertility treatments, has listed on the Hong Kong stock market. Its shares rose 97% on the first day, closing at $209.60, compared to its initial public offering price of $99. A delegation from China's Ministry of National Defense visited Europe from March 23 to 29, participating in a series of institutional dialogues, including the 15th China-EU Defense and Security Dialogue and the 9th China-NATO Security Policy Dialogue. Chinese AI startup DeepSeek experienced a major service outage lasting 12 hours, affecting millions of users, but services were restored by Monday morning. Next, here are the key stories from Japan. Domestically, a majority of business executives oppose the zero-consumption tax policy, and long-term interest rates have recorded their largest increase in 18 years. Internationally, the G7 has pledged cooperation to ensure energy security, and Japanese companies have begun procuring alternative naphtha sources in response to the Middle East situation. TSMC has announced plans for 3-nanometer semiconductor production in Kumamoto. Regarding the zero-consumption tax policy for food and beverages, which the Sanai Takaichi administration aims to implement, a survey of 100 company presidents revealed that 66.3% of major Japanese business executives oppose it, while 86% are in favor of a grant-type tax credit. In response to the de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz, G7 finance and energy ministers issued a joint statement after an online consultation, pledging to take all necessary measures to ensure energy security. Following this, Japanese companies such as Mitsui Chemicals and Mitsubishi Chemical Group have begun procuring alternative naphtha from outside the Middle East. TSMC has informed Sennai Takaichi of a new plan to consider producing advanced 3nm semiconductors for AI and smartphones at its planned second factory in Kumamoto. Furthermore, Japan and Indonesia have agreed on economic cooperation totaling $22.6 billion, approximately 3.6 trillion yen, in areas including energy. Next, here are the key stories from Asia-Oceania. In Myanmar, the military junta leader is transitioning towards a presidential election. The Thai Prime Minister has apologized for fuel issues and announced policy changes, and guidelines on freedom of speech in parliament are being discussed in Malaysia, reflecting significant political and social developments in the region. Myanmar's military junta leader, Min Aung Hlaing, resigned as commander-in-chief on March 30th and was nominated as a vice presidential candidate for the upcoming presidential election. This move is seen as a step towards regime transition by the individual who staged a coup 5 years ago and imprisoned Aung San Suu Kyi. Thai Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul publicly apologized for fuel management issues in early March, acknowledging that they caused market distortions and shortages. He announced a policy shift from rigid price caps to a targeted support model for vulnerable groups, farmers, and the transportation sector. New guidelines for discussing race, religion, and the monarchy, the 3 rupees, have been proposed in the Malaysian parliament. The government explains that these are not intended to restrict freedom of speech but to establish an ethical framework for maintaining harmony in a diverse society. Next, here are the key stories from South America. The region has seen diverse developments in politics, economics, and society, including political movements in Venezuela, permission for Russian oil transport to Cuba, protests in Chile due to soaring fuel prices, a decrease in exports to the US from Brazil, and drug seizures in Uruguay. The detained former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro released his first statement, calling for national reconciliation and expressing support for the leadership of interim President Delcy Rodriguez. The United States has permitted Russian oil tankers to transport approximately 650,000 to 730,000 barrels of crude oil to Cuba, marking the first easing of the de facto energy blockade since the beginning of the year. Chile has experienced significant fuel price hikes, with gasoline increasing by 32% and diesel by 62%, triggering the first street protests against the Cast administration. That concludes today's Global News Report. Have a great day. Thank you for watching.